Good morning, guys. Today we are going to be taking notes. I did include some printable copies so that if you would like to print those and fill in the blank, you can. Otherwise, you're going to need to write a lot today, and I'm sorry, we are trying to get as much in before Christmas break as we can. So today what we're going to be talking about are some adaptations that plants have and some structures that help them respond to changes in their environment. Remember when we talked about our nervous system in the human body, we talked about things that are stimulus, changes to our environment, and our response to that. Well, just like animals, plants can also respond to their environment, and we're going to talk about some special ways that they respond to changes in their environment. So remember, to be a living thing, you must be able to respond to changes, and plants are living things, and they can respond to changes in their environment. So let's talk a little bit about some of those parts that help them do that. What do plant cells have that animal cells do not? Now, I know we talked about cells a long time ago, but if you think about plant cells, what did they have? They had chloroplast, and they had a cell wall. And cell walls are very important when it comes to something called turgor pressure. Turgor pressure is the pressure that's inside a plant cell when water forces and pushes against the cell wall. This is how plants are able to stand upright and not just fall over. They don't have bones like we do, and so they use pressure like in a water balloon, right, to hold them upright. That's why if you've ever had a plant, like at my house, that got a little droopy, right, it's because there's not as much turgor pressure. There's not as much water in the plant to help it stand up straight. So healthy plant cells are what we call turgid. If you look at the diagram on the screen, you can see that on the left, we've got a very turgid or full plant cell. It's got a lot of water that's keeping it nice and strong and tall. On the right side, we've got kind of a rigid or less rigid, right? It's flaccid. It doesn't have as much strength because it's not full of water. So that turgidity, it's a fancy science word, is given to the plant by the water that's in each and every plant cell. Okay, so if you're looking at these two examples, which plant cell is going to have, or plant is going to have a higher turgor pressure? The one on the left that's standing upright with its blooms nice and tall, or the one on the right that's kind of gone limp, right? The one on the left is going to have more turgor pressure because it is nice and strong and full of water. The one on the right is not going to have very much turgor pressure. It doesn't have very much water pushing against the cell walls to keep it standing nice and straight. There are a couple of structures in plants that help them maintain turgor pressure. There are two main types of vessels. Just like we have blood vessels in our bodies, plants have vessels in their stems and trunks as well. This is where we get tree rings from. We have layers of xylem and phloem. And xylem transports water to parts of the plant. These are kind of like blood vessels in the human body, right? They transport water up from the roots where the water is taken in, and that transports it all the way out to the leaves, right? Phloem flows in two directions, and that's because it transports sugar and minerals. And every part of the plant, just like every part of our body, needs that sugar to go through cellular respiration. So it's a two-way passageway in phloem. It flows down so that roots can grow farther out, right? And it goes up so that leaves and branches can grow farther out. So xylem transports water, phloem transports sugars and minerals. If you printed this, you have an opportunity right now to color code it. So we're going to color code our water, dark blue, coming up from the roots. Then we're going to color code our xylem. It's labeled with the X over here on the left side of the picture with blue, and that's taking that water up from the roots. Remember, xylem flows in one direction, up, because water comes into the plant from the roots. And phloem is made in the leaves. You can see our nice green leaves color-coded over there. They're labeled with the letter L. And then water is going to, phloem is going to transport the sugar that's made in the leaves. Remember, through cellular respiration, it's going to go in each of those plant cells. Those chloroplasts are going to do their magic. They're going to transform that carbon dioxide and that water into sugar. And that sugar needs to go to all the parts of the plant so that it can grow. Right? So if you want to pause the video right now and you can color code that, you can. If you're wondering about those little boxes that are in the middle between the xylem and the phloem, those are old layers. And so that's where we get tree rings from, is those old layers of xylem and phloem that are still standing, right, because they're made of cellulose, that strong fibrous material that a lot of plants are made of, but they don't transport anything anymore. They're just there for sturdiness, trees especially. All right, so if you want to take a second to pause the video and color code your first diagram, you can do that now. Okay, so we're going to carry on. Good job coloring your diagram. I hope that you can put a picture, upload a picture of that with your assignment today to get your points. We're going to watch this quick video.
When you're literally rooted to your environment, how do you survive if conditions aren't ideal? If you ask a plant, they'll suggest tropism and dormancy. Even though it may seem subtle to us legged creatures, plants can and do move. They can move their roots, stems, and leaves toward or away from different stimulus. Movement of roots toward water, hydrotropism. Movement towards light, phototropism. Movement in response to gravity, gravitropism. Movement in response to touch, so obviously named thigmotropism. And if all else fails, plants have the amazing ability to go dormant, to basically temporarily halt their growth, development, and functioning until things get a bit less hairy. And if they can't disperse future generations, i.e. seeds, far enough, they can ensure the seeds wait it out as well. Some seeds can remain dormant for hundreds of years until things get a tad more favorable. Then they start germination and ta-da, off they grow. So even though they are quite literally rooted to the spot, plants are far from helpless. If they can't turn the other cheek, they can at least sleep it off, so to speak.
All right, so you're going to switch to this handout now if you printed them. If not, I would advise you to kind of sketch this out maybe on your paper for a second because this is going to make it a lot easier to kind of see the different parts of responses to stimulus that plants can use to be able to adapt to their environment. A tropism is when a plant moves towards or away from a stimulus. And remember, stimulus is just our fancy science word for a change in the environment. Trop is a fancy science word part that means to turn. And so you're going to see that word several times because we're going to be talking about how those plants are able to turn based on certain characteristics, certain conditions in their environment. Positive tropisms. Let me move my little box here. Positive tropisms means they're turning towards something, right? A negative tropism means you're turning away from a stimulus, right? So when we talk about a stimulus, we're talking about when we talk about a tropism, we're talking about a positive tropism or a negative tropism. Positive means you're turning towards something. Negative means you're turning away. So a positive tropism towards light would mean it's turning towards the light. Negative tropism towards light would be it's turning away from the light. There are three main types of tropisms in plants: phototropism, geotropism, and hydrotropism. And we're going to talk about what each one does. Phototropism. Move my guy again over here. Phototropism happens when there is movement towards the stimulus. And in this case, photo means light. Remember, we talked about photosynthesis. We're talking about light. And so positive phototropism would be in the stems and leaves of plants. They grow towards the sun. If you've ever seen a field of sunflowers, they tilt towards the sun. That's why we call them sunflowers. Movement away from stimulus or away from the light, in this case of phototropism, is negative phototropism. Roots always grow away from the light, right? They're seeking out water, and water is usually deeper underground, so they grow away from that stimulus, away from the light. Remember, phototropism is a movement of a plant in response to light in their environment, either positive, growing towards the light, or negative, growing away from the light. Geotropism. Geo is our word part that means earth, right? And so when we look at plants, stems and leaves have negative geotropism. They grow away from the earth, right? When we look at roots, they have positive geotropism. They're growing towards the earth. Movement towards or away from the earth is geotropism. Sometimes you'll see this in videos called gravitropism, but we're going to use the term geotropism in our studies. So remember, geo means earth. If it's growing towards, that means towards the earth, right? Towards the center of the earth. That's going to be positive geotropism, like roots grow down closer to the center of the earth. Stems and leaves have a negative geotropism. They grow away from the earth, right? They grow towards the sky. So those are the two types of positive and negative geotropism. Hydrotropism has to do with hydro, water, right? This is when roots grow towards the stimulus, the water, right? Positive hydrotropism. That's when plants really want to get towards water, right? We see this sometimes in swampy areas. They have these huge, big root systems that have grown towards the water, so much so that now they're underwater, right? This is a plant moving in response to water. We also see this in cacti, right? They're growing out. They have these big, widespread root systems, and that's so that they can catch those water droplets when it dews or when it rains every once in a while in their desert conditions. Thigmotropism is not on your paper, but it's a fun one, and I thought you guys would enjoy these videos. So this one is just for fun. Thigmotropism happens when a stimulus, touch, changes the direction of the growth of a plant. So when shoots grow, shoots are what we call the tips of the plants. Shoots grow towards the stimulus or touch, that's a positive thigmotropism. This is how vines climb up. They touch something and they wrap around it, right? Like the video on top. On the bottom, you see a plant that moves away from the stimulus, away from touch. That's that negative thigmotropism. Okay? So in summary, tropisms occur when plants respond to external stimuli, a change in their environment. Tropisms are movements that are caused by a change in a growth pattern. Okay, so tropisms are movements of plants. Remember, trop is that word part that means to turn. Tropisms can be negative or positive. Negative means it's moving away from whatever the stimulus is. Positive means it's moving towards whatever the stimulus is. If the plant moves towards the stimulus, the tropism is positive. If it moves away from the stimulus, the tropism is negative. Okay? So what I want you to do is in your journal, I want you to answer these 3 questions. This is where you're going to take a picture of your notes for today. So go ahead and answer question number 1. In the image above, what part of the plant exhibits positive tropism and what parts of the plant exhibit negative tropism? Question number 2, why would it be important for some parts of a plant to be pulled towards water? And question number 3, why do you think sunflowers were given their name? So I'm going to pause the video so that you guys can answer those questions, and we will pick back up tomorrow.